Hi everyone, this is Joy Rosso with Earthworks Acupuncture, and we're back with Kendra Sims, PhD candidate, soon to be epidemiologist. Last week we went over how to identify good research versus not so good research, kind of clickbait, bad research. And this week is a little bit of a continuation with a wonderful slideshow on the difference between risk and prevalence or existence of a disease. So Kendra, take it away.
Yeah, it's good to be back. And yeah, I think if there had been like an evil genie who had granted the wish of making epidemiologists pretty common in, everyone's general awareness, this would be the wish he would grant me. So that being said, I hope that by like exposing people to kind of the basics of what we do, getting a sense of what epidemiology is meant for, as well as what it's not meant for, you'll be a lot more accurate than a lot of people on your social media feeds, or frankly, a lot of our politicians who are making a lot of the decisions that kind of shape our daily lives. Yeah, because in epidemiology, like context is everything.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm going to share a slide. All right, okay, here we are. All right, and so I'll start here because at the base, kind of like, the basis of epidemiology is a lot of fractions. And this is gonna give some people flashbacks to like high school math. And I'm not asking people to be able to calculate all of these fractions that kind of drive my field, but just understanding kind of what goes into them will really change this goofy slide. And you will kind of understand just like what goes into the fractions that make up the decisions that drive a lot of health research. So just that being said, context matters. So I guess let's start by defining what an epidemic is. An epidemic is just a health condition or a disease, let's say it's kidney disease, that's happening in either a community or in a certain group of people or in a region more than what would be expected. And sometimes that's really clear cut. Like say there's E. coli and it's happening, if it's happening, it really shouldn't be. And we'll see spikes in the news where people have been eating exposed salad and they're getting sick from that. So that could be like a small scale. If it like ramps up and affects enough people, that would be an epidemic because we don't expect to see very many cases of, say, E. coli. Mm-hmm. Other epidemics aren't so clear cut. Some that have been in the news, say, are the opioid misuse epidemic. So that's they kind of define that we're just seeing a spike among white men that were disproportionately affected by opioid epidemics. That's how they were kind of framing that in the news. What epidemiology is about is not trying to prevent all the disease, because we're not saying that no disease should happen. It's just that when we see like clusters of it, or if it's happening disproportionately or just more than would be expected, that's where we can, once we identify that, we can intervene and, improve the health of the public.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people who don't really understand what epidemiology is, because, right, epidemiology, they hear that, they think epidemics, they think it is just like one large spike, but it is just trends in health within populations or subsets of populations. And yeah, how you can intervene in them. That's great.
No, it is. And the way we kind of tell the difference between like what's normal and what's like above that is by doing what's called surveillance. So that means all the time, not only just when people are sick, but just throughout the year, even in times when things are normal, is just counting how many people have a disease in a current population. And the people who do that range from your local public health department to the CDC to the World Health Organizations. And so it's just a difference in scale, like who they're in charge of and who they want to, whose disease burden they want to represent. And by collecting data in a continuous systematic way, they're able to see that these diseases aren't occurring by chance. And again, it just find ways, all right, how do we target that and how do we reduce that burden?
Right.
Yeah. So I know that you and Dr. Lee talked about, say, kidney disease. And so one of the ways that we kind of quantify the patterns in, say, the health impact or the health burden of, say, kidney disease is a measure of association called prevalence. And so going into prevalence is, so say we had 1,000 people, a population, and that was our population. And then we saw that out of 1,000, that would be the bottom number, that denominator, 100 of them had kidney disease. So it would be 100 over 1,000.
Okay, so can you kind of point on the slide where these numbers are going? Like if I'm looking at it. So
Sure.
the number of existing cases.
Sure, so that would be the 100.
Okay.
And then the entire population, including those 100 people with kidney disease, would all go on the bottom.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And that gives you a decent idea, especially for something that's pretty chronic, of kind of the impact of that disease. But let's try another condition. Let's say we had the flu, like the influenza. Let's say again we had a population of 1,000, and so that would be our bottom number, the denominator. And then we said, okay, our number of existing cases are, maybe we said they were like 200 of them. But doing that kind of doesn't capture the fact that people are always getting sick, they're getting better really quickly, people are moving out of that numerator so quickly that that snapshot that's given to you by prevalence isn't really giving you the whole picture of the health in a population.
So prevalence is like what the aim is trying to show you is an accurate number.
Yeah. And, that's a great start. But say you wanted to know, back to that kidney disease example, if you had a population where no one had kidney disease at first, maybe you want to see like in the next 10 years, how many people in that population would get kidney disease. The denominator is what's going to change. You need to focus on, because we have at the beginning of when we're studying, let's say 10 years. Let's say again we had 1,000 people, but now what we would have in that top number is just the number of new cases. So if people had come into your study, or you had come into your study starting off with kidney disease, we wouldn't be taking them into consideration because they're not at risk of kidney disease if they already have it.
Okay, so when you're looking for incident proportions, you're not counting the folks that already have met that criteria of the disease that you're looking at.
Yeah, like we aren't as interested in, okay, these people have it because we couldn't really intervene on them, they're not at risk, but now we're seeing over time who's getting it newly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Think of it like, instead of miles per hour, think of it like cases per population. And just going back one comparison, this might tell you like the distance you traveled, like, okay, this is like the burden, this is how far we went, this is the impact, but maybe you wanted to know, hey, how fast is this happening?
Oh, that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. And because I'm also a very visual learner, so and another way to think of it is like, let's say that you had a bathtub with a faucet coming down it, and there's water coming down into that bathtub. The prevalence would be the bathtub, the water already in the bathtub, and the incidence proportion, or the risk, would be the water that's coming down the faucet into the bathtub. Like whether you're thinking of like driving or you're thinking about like water flowing into a bathtub, you have two different ways to think about it.
Okay.
And yeah. And why is that important? Because, all right, let's say we had that flu example again. 100 cases in 1,000 people over a week has a much different impact than like a 100 cases in 1,000 over a year.
Yeah.
It's happening like it's so much faster, and that's like a bigger health problem.
Yeah, I think, and again, I know that we were trying to steer clear, but this is important, in current news when we are hearing about coronavirus cases spiking, like when they tell you that there are 1,000 new cases in a day, That's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, what if those 1,000 new cases are happening in, Montana versus New York City? The US has had like the most cases in the world. We also have one of the biggest populations in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, not to minimize anything, this is still very important, but just think about, what's going in that bottom number.
Totally.
Yeah. So the context is really anything. So, and kind of like to add some nuance to that, let's say we don't know if people are at risk. Let's say we don't know their disease status. It's really hard to get a sense of like what that number of new cases means. Like, what are we missing in that denominator and who are we capturing?
Okay.
So, yeah, it's just that maybe I know a lot of people are worried or stressed out, but sometimes it's just that kind of this awareness of what we might not know might in some ways calm you down, because you know that like people eventually, once you have a condition, you're not at risk for it. That denominator is changing. And I'm just hoping that people are kind of taking the numbers they see with a greater grain of salt and asking, okay, so what's that denominator? What are you really telling me? So yeah, that's all I got.
I
Yeah.
think that this is really helpful, just to kind of dovetail from last week into and how to differentiate between good news and bad news, and just having these kinds of numbers in mind in terms of what it is risk within a population and the existence of the risk within the population. So thanks, Kendra, this was really helpful.
All right.
And yeah, hopefully we can go into some other kinds of non-COVID related diseases and medical issues in some coming videos with you.
Yeah, I really look forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks.